we are heading straight into our final panel of the day now, which is titled "What Do Publishers Do for Their Money?" And that will be moderated by Gayle from Fellow Traveller, who is heading in now.
Hello.
There we go. Hey, Des, how you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks.
Perfect. Good. And Des will be joined by a few panelists now, and they're all on the way in very slowly. I think we've got everyone there. Oh, missing Jason, I think.
Yeah. Here we go.
Brilliant. So if you're ready to get started, Des, I will leave you guys to it.
Awesome. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gayle, and I look after production at Fellow Traveller, and we're an indie publishing label based in Australia doing narrative-led games. Thanks for joining us today. I'm joined on a very, very stacked panel with great people from the industry, and we're going to talk about mobile publishing. Yeah, essentially, imagine a situation where, like, you've downloaded your favorite game engine, you've pressed the make game button, now you've logged it on a store somewhere. That's job done, right? Like, don't do anything else. But then it goes fails, you try again next time, and then you thought, oh, why don't I use a publisher? They come back to you and say, well, hey, we could do all that for you, but how about we take 30%? Sounds quite steep, right? But I'm going to ask everyone here today what exactly we do get for that 30%. So I'll let the panelists introduce themselves, and I will start with Leanne.
Hello, everyone. My name's Leanne, and I work for Riot Games. I head up Riot Forge, which is Riot's third-party publishing label, and we're working with a variety of different developers to make League of Legends games.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
There you go.
That's not embarrassing at all.
You just did your whole introduction.
So my name is Jason Fraser. I am the indie dev representative of today's panel. I am one of the two co-founders of Dark Horse Digital, based in Australasia, and thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. I'm just going to go around as you are on my screen. So, Kevin?
Hey, my name's Kevin Flynn. I've been doing mobile game publishing for about 12 years now. Led publishing efforts at Crowdstar and Kabam, and then about 6 years ago started a boutique consulting shop. Have helped probably about 75 games launch in the past 6 years. So excited to be here. And then if people get mad if I don't say this, I'm also the creator of Peanut Butter Jelly Time. If you don't know what it is, don't look it up. It's terrible. But otherwise, people get upset when they find out that I made it and I didn't tell them. So,
cheers. Ryan?
Yep. Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone at home. Hope everyone's staying safe. My name is Ryan. I'm the Senior Director of Publishing over at Jam City, a US-based publisher. From a publishing perspective over at Jam City, I help manage, our relationships with first party to really help bring our games to market.
Awesome. Thank you. Naheda?
Hi everyone, mic is on, yeah. Hi everyone, I'm Naheda, Commercial Associate at Miniclip. Together with my team, I help drive our third-party publishing, co-development, and strategic partnerships.
Thank you. And last but not least, Paul.
Hello. My name is Paul Fend. I'm currently the Vice President of Business Development for Denuvo, Biodetto. I must say that Denuvo is the #1 app protection and anti-piracy technology platform. We've protected over 1,000 games, and we've secured about $10 billion of games revenue for our developers and publishers. So personally, I've been in the games industry for about 17 years and have published several titles, starting with the PC browser and then on mobile, different companies, Disney, Habbo, Fox, Spill Games, etc. So we're sponsoring, but I happen to know something about this topic, and we're very happy to be here. So
awesome. Thank you. I guess we'll get right into it then. I guess what should we do? Yes, too generic. All right. So, what are the top 3 reasons for a developer to sign with a publisher? And I'll go the other way around this time. So, I'll start with Naheda.
I would say the number one reason to sign with a publisher is expertise. Publishers have spent a lot of time and resource to build infrastructure to, help support publishing a game. So, if you think about some of these services like PR, localization, marketing, in-game advertising, data analysis, forecasting, to name a few, they take a lot of time, and a publisher has already done that work. Whereas for an indie developer, it's, if you have that time, great, but otherwise it's a bit of a luxury, because as an indie dev, you want to focus on developing your game, engaging the drivers that a publisher would drive into that game. The other 2, should we name 3 or just go over the top?
I guess we could go around. So yeah, that's one. Great. So let's go for Ryan. Do you want to add another one?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there are a whole variety of reasons why like developers should be partnering with a publisher. I mean, Naheda said it herself. Publishers have their resources and teams dedicated solely to help scale their game, worldwide. Just over at Gem City, we have dedicated teams, with various expertise. You have a dedicated UA team to help scale up your games in certain geos. From an ASO perspective, we have like a team dedicated solely to like optimizing your storefront and your CBR and organic keyword growth. You also have like the key benefits of having direct relationships with first party like Apple and Google to help, get your games featured on the respective app stores. I mean, there are many things. The mobile landscape, especially in gaming, is getting increasingly competitive. UA costs are very expensive. It just gets more and more competitive every year. So it just becomes, from my perspective, that much more important to partner with, a publisher that, has the right expertise to help scale.
Cool, thank you. Leanne, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think the other piece really depends on what type of publisher you are partnering with. But someone like Riot, for example, we obviously own the IP. And with that comes a very big and broad captive audience. So I think if you can publish, partner with a publisher that has a very popular IP and a really large audience that you can then lean into, you can build a game for that audience. And they're kind of ready and waiting for that game. And that might not be an audience that you could get on your own. So I think, not only the expertise from the publisher, but also the ecosystem and the captive audience that a publisher may have.
Awesome. Nice. Thank you. Kevin, did we miss anything there?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest thing is just what pitfalls to kind of watch out for. When launching a game, there's literally 1,000 things that can go wrong. And unfortunately, unless you've done it a lot, it's things that you only kind of learn by having gone through it. So I think one of the things that, a lot of people kind of overlook is the fact that publishers can help you kind of navigate that road and hopefully avoid the pitfalls. You're still going to run into something, something's going to go wrong. It always happens, but hopefully with people that have seen it before, they can kind of guide you through the process a little bit better.
Okay, cool. Paul?
Yeah, I think that was a really great summary of all the different things. One thing that I thought I'd add was the special relationships that some big publishers tend to have with the ad networks. So having been on the ad side of the business, the ECPMs that you can earn from your game could be higher as a result of the fact that publisher has a favorable relationship with an ad network, and also just PR in general, solid relationships with writers or bloggers or key influencers. And obviously the big one is user acquisition and traffic. So I think all the way around, it's in this kind of climate and how mobile gaming is getting pretty saturated globally. It's a good thing for a developer.
Cool. And Jason, from your perspective, is there anything that they haven't listed that you'd expect as a developer, that you want a publisher to handle?
No, I think it's pretty much covered. I mean, the reasons why we would be looking for to leverage a publisher is mainly audience and having access to some of the expertise that people have already mentioned. So yeah, I think we've pretty much covered it.
Awesome. I'll just stick with you just for a point that Paul brought up. How important is press for mobile games?
From a developer point of view, it's really important. Like I think it's one of those things that everybody's kind of already spoken about. You know, saturation, market saturation, and just trying to get any sort of publicity or exposure is really, really difficult. And it's almost like you have to do something so outlandishly crazy to get seen, and in order to get any sort of publicity, I'm not quite sure that is kind of where you want to go. So being able to leverage those tools and activities and stuff is really helpful.
Okay, cool. And I guess I'll jump over to Ryan. So, like, does your experience reflect that? Like, are you seeing? Is this how mobile gamers discover content? Is it through press and PR and not through stores?
Was that to me?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, when we're launching a game, you know, press obviously does play like a huge impact. So just making sure you have like traction with various media outlets. But however, like it's not just press, it's also paired with featuring, it's paired with UA. Like it's all of these different cross-functional teams like doing their job at that one big moment to really help, you know, get the word out and to really help not only like increase or like help in the UA traffic, but just overall organics. So it's not just press that's important, it's obviously all different, you know, parts of the spectrum to help launch your game.
Awesome, thanks for that. And I guess just to continue something else that I mentioned, I remember like a long time ago that the goal for us was always to get a feature spot on one of the stores. Not seeing much, you know, action on that these days. Is that a trend that you're seeing as well? And I'll put that to Naheda.
Featuring is definitely still valuable. I can't quite comment on how valuable it was then compared to now, but you know, we 100% welcome featuring. Our most latest release, Ultimate Golf, got featured last week, and just through that one single featuring got around 5,000 installs, which, you know, we will happily welcome any day. But in terms of the comparison, I can't quite comment on that just yet.
Okay. Yeah, and just want to jump just regarding featuring, like not comparing like old versus new, but from a featuring perspective, it's extremely valuable, especially with the way each store, you know, is able to personalize, you know, what goes in front of the user. I know the App Store and Google Play do this quite often. And just from a Gem City perspective, you know, featuring is still very much like a very like huge tool, not only bringing our games to market, but also obviously through like live service games.
Okay. And how about you, Kevin? Have you, what, you know, is that trend been reflected in stuff that you've seen over the years?
Yeah, so we actually did specialize a lot in the featuring aspect. So over the past decade, I think I've probably had close to 200 front page features. Featuring definitely used to be a kingmaker. I mean, you're talking millions and millions of downloads, you know, back in probably 2012, 2013, 2014. Obviously, as more and more games come out, the stores kind of have to feature more and more titles, which kind of dilutes the audience a bit. That being said, you know, like everyone else said, featuring is still important, not just for the users it brings in, but also for stuff like ASO rankings. You know, that sort of stuff has become increasingly important. And I actually would argue that ASO has probably surpassed featuring as being the most valuable source of high quality organic traffic. So while featuring is no longer, you know, gonna make or break your game, it's still, you know, great to have. And you can also kind of get into a cadence with the stores where you're hopefully being featured and then refeatured every, you know, 3 to 4 months. And so you're kind of constantly getting that new influx of high quality organic users.
Okay, that's really cool. So, say as a developer, like I'm hard-headed, I'm adamant that I want to self-publish. If App Store optimization is really important, what is there one key asset that I should spend my money on that will have the most effect? Like, or is it all of it, like a description, screenshots, or a trailer? Like, is there one thing I could be like, that's what I'm going to spend money on?
No, I mean, from an ASO perspective, sorry to jump in there. Like each part of the page is very important to optimize. Like icon's the first thing you see. Like, and not only with the icon, you have to make sure the icon is paired well with like the perfect video, the perfect description, and the screenshots. So as you're testing, you got to make sure you're like taking into account each element holistically, right? And using that paired with like different variants. Obviously, like keyword optimization, you know, also plays like a huge role in terms of, you know, increasing your organic ranking and organic installs. But, you know, as soon as users like kind of land on the page, we have to make sure that page is like optimized correctly for your target audience.
Yeah, and the other thing is ASO is actually constantly changing. It's like a big mystery box. We're not quite sure what the algorithms are that, you know, are driving these things. We have pretty good guesses, but it's also constantly changing. So I would say, you know, agree with Ryan that they're all important. I would say icon is by far the most important, and then probably the screenshots. But they all kind of go into the equation of you know, what's going to drive that organic traffic.
Yeah, I was just going to add, you only kind of have a second to impress the visitors and convert them to downloads. So you have to keep everything kind of simple but inspiring. So I think submitting a story to like Apple, for example, is important to be prepared and kind of maximize the opportunity. You also may be able to get a featuring period of like 1 to 5 days, depending on store. So today, the Today tab probably gets the most views, right? So there, I think, kind of echoing Ryan and Kevin's points, awesome visuals, you know, for editorials would be good. And Apple kind of shows the UI and the in-app content in the editorials. So you should kind of prepare the visuals, I think, before submitting the story, and then kind of use them to convince Apple to feature it, really. I think that's the developer partners that I've talked to are really working through that and have great visuals and stories and things like that.
Yep.
Anyone else got anything to add on that one? No, good. Just to go back to a little bit of the business bits and opposite to the question I had earlier, what would be your top reason for a developer not to sign with a publisher? And I'm going to direct that at, who do I start with? Let's go with you, Paul. Sorry.
Yeah, that's a good question, right? Like, because we work with developers and publishers, so we like them both. But yeah, great question. I would say I'd love to hear what the panel thinks, but loss of creative control might be one. I'm kind of like for the indies all the time, so I certainly think, you know, if they dictate what kind of SDK should be included in your app or those kind of things, these are all part of deal negotiations that I think, you know, you can watch out for. You know, maybe one-sided budget decisions are a big one. I remember when I was publishing the not properly defining what ROAS is as far as your organic installs versus what's recouped when you're doing your ad spend. Something that Kevin would probably be able to help developers out with if they already use his services. And then I don't know, like I think it's more of a sense of empowerment. I think publishing today, I mean, leveling the playing field, looking at all the tools that are out there, the investors, the services, trying to de-risk this and really figure it out from a KPI and optimization standpoint. It makes sense to sometimes like think about going at it alone because there could be much of a longer process. You know, publishers get a ton of games and it's hard for them to check out which ones might be taking off. And then the other thing is, you know, if they're trying to limit you to a certain store, restrict your ability to distribute the game globally. I think that these are all concerns and things you should look out for because then it might affect your revenue in the long term.
I think it's really important to kind of highlight, I guess, the importance to say no and to walk away if the deal isn't overly good to you. Recently, we've spoken to a number of publishers, and unfortunately, the deals have been very one-sided, and particularly initial cost. You know, a lot of publishers have said, "Well, we need you to we need you to be invested in the process. And you know, you kind of scratch your head and think, you know, like 8 years trying to get games to market, like I think we're pretty invested. And just knowing that it is okay to say no to a deal which you don't think is good for you, I think it's quite important. I think a lot of, and I might be speaking a little bit out of shop, but I think a lot of younger teams might feel as though that that the opportunity they have at this particular point in time may be the only opportunity that they get, and may feel even more compelled to do that type of deal. Whereas, you know, we're much older, and we realise that, you know, it's actually better sometimes to kind of walk away from a deal if it doesn't fit you, and then get into one that where it really doesn't, you know, help you out.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think, you know, sometimes publishers may have their own interests at heart and not the developers necessarily. I think one of the biggest reasons to not sign with a publisher is constraints. You know, everyone needs healthy constraints, but working with a publisher, you may have constraints that you wouldn't necessarily put on your own development, especially when it comes to things like localization and QA and, you know, all of those dependency teams that a publisher is very robust on. You know, you must have your localization done by this time and your QA done by this time. If you're doing that yourself in your own sort of indie development, you may, you know, be okay with being a little bit more flexible and scrappy with that. And so those constraints just might not fit the way that your, you know, studio likes to work. So I definitely, you know, +1 to Paul as well on sort of the potential loss of autonomy to some extent, depending on, you know, what's important to you as a studio. Some studios actually like that constraint because it actually means they're going to get a game out rather than like work on a game for, you know, 10+ years. But yeah, I think some of the top reasons to not work with a publisher would be lack of autonomy and, you know, those constraints not really working for your studio.
Yeah, and if I can just add to that, I think another big reason is lack of culture fit, just to echo what Leanne and Jason have said. You know, there are lots of publishers out there, of all sizes and of different approaches. So when speaking with a publisher, you know, as a developer, you need to ask yourself, is there a connection? Is there a disconnection? What are the publishers' expectations? Do I enjoy speaking with these people, the publishers? Because, you know, once that deal is signed, at least at Miniclip, we're looking at a long-term partnership. So it'll be good if we like one another and, you know, we can work well with one another. It would, yeah, help with everything.
Yeah, just like adding to culture fit, 100% agree. But I think also like the focus and expertise of the publisher, like very much matters as well. So let's say you're an indie developer, you know, developing like an RPG game. Does that publisher have expertise scaling that type of genre? Right. So you have to make sure there's like a good, not only culture fit, but like genre and expertise fit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the last thing I would add is it's just expertise and kind of being able to see what's going on. Unfortunately, a lot of publishers have kind of poisoned the well a bit. So, you know, when I kind of hear people say, oh, you know, publishers are kind of evil and they kind of instantly have that taken aback, I understand why. You know, there have been usurious terms, and I've heard stories of developers that signed a publishing contract and then had no idea where their marketing money was going. And so, you know, I think that's starting to change. I mean, the reason that we founded ChargeUp Games was literally to try to give developers more insight into what's going on, more transparency, and to kind of really treat them as full partners. But, you know, there are different publishers across the board that do different things and kind of have different levels of hand-holding depending. I mean, some developers don't want anything to do with that. They just want to make their game and be done with it. And that's fine. You know, there are definitely publishers out there that will handle that. But at least from what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to kind of educate the developers just from, again, my own learnings and failures and things that I've seen. But I can definitely see why people would kind of initially push back against going with the publisher.
I also think it's important to understand who in the development team you're dealing with as well. Like, we don't do any coding. All of our coding is outsourced, and I don't want to generalize by kind of saying that our people skills are a little bit better, but you know, like if you're dealing with somebody who's uncomfortable with dealing with people, then, you know, that might also change the way in which the relationship goes as well. So Yeah, it's certainly I think reliant and dependent on who it is that you're dealing with from a developer or in their developer team as well.
Yeah, and on the other side as well, you know, the publishers have different cultures, as we're saying. I think there's some publishers that are more developers, like Forge, for example. Our whole team consists of people that have been making games in the development side for years, as well as publishing. So we know how games are made, and I think sometimes there is a, stereotype in publishers that they don't know how games are made, and they've just always been on the business side. So I think it's, again, just doing the evaluation on the publisher and seeing what experience they have and expertise. I think especially in the indie development scene, it's great for indie devs to work with publishers that are developers themselves and know how to make those games.
Awesome. So once we've got past all that, like, I mean, this is great stuff here. I particularly like the comments about culture and fit. Like that's something that we look for a lot when we decide to sign a team. But I guess just dig a little bit deeper on that. So what's the key driver for you when you're deciding to sign a team? Like, is it just a team? Like, is it the idea? Is it the traction they've already got? Like, is it everything? And I'll direct that at, let's go for Paul.
Well, I haven't signed a team in a while, but I've signed a team for other stuff. But when I was signing teams, I would say that, and this is a very general comment, but it would be just the composition of the team, just having kind of the roles kind of well-defined, I think, and having a sense of the metrics and the numbers. I used to see a lot of beautiful games, lovely, built in all the different engines. But I sometimes felt that, the leadership in the teams wasn't clearly defined, 3 co-founders or 4 co-founders, and nobody wants to take the lead on being the business person or the technical person or the creative, game design type. I think those kind of 3 roles being defined was important to me. And then also some sense of their KPIs and their metrics and the retention and all the, 40, 20, 10 and all the good stuff we would talk about, just so that we're on the same page and the basis of actually working together is established right off the bat, rather than, it's just so off base that you can't really get anything done.
And I think what Naheda actually had a really good point where, you have to like the people you're working with. These are hopefully going to be very long-term relationships. We have developers we've been working with literally for 4 to 5 years now. Especially in free-to-play live services games, because ideally, you're going to launch them and they're just going to continue to do well and hopefully kind of have that really long-term revenue. So you have to be able to like the people and work with them. And then ideally, for me, it's developers that are open to feedback. I'm definitely not the type that says you have to do X, Y, and Z. But I might say, hey, based on prior experience, I recommend you do X for this reason and Y for this reason. And it's great if developers are kind of willing to listen and change or have a discussion. I have unfortunately seen developers just go, nope, we're not going to do anything. We have our plan. We're sticking to it. And from my experience, those relationships just never work out. And it's a two-way street. If developers have feedback for us, then we need to be kind of open to changing a bit too.
Yeah, I think I can certainly say from the other side of things as well, like the points made about liking the people who you're actually working with sort of work for, from a development point of view, and absolutely the whole being sort of like any sort of good relationship, there's a little bit of give and take, and not so much, a lot of giving and a lot of taking. But yeah, the point around liking the people you work with is certainly very important, because like everyone has said, it's you're hoping it's going to be a long-term relationship, and you don't want to be dreading every time you get on a call with somebody and those types of things. So
I think adding to that, likability is obviously very important, but also just making sure that the developers have experience working with different cross-functional teams, like they have experience working directly with UA teams, with publishing, etc., because that'll just make the process that much more smooth. Once the deal is signed and it's ready to help scale your game.
Yeah, and from my perspective, I think, yeah, relationships, leadership, the way the team is set up and structured is really important. The other thing that I look for is something unique in the studio, especially because we're working in the League of Legends IP and we want to reimagine the League IP into something unique from that studio so that they have their DNA inside of that. So a studio that has a really clear vision, a really clear strategy of where they want to be as a studio, and they understand like where they're heading, and then something unique about them that really stands them out against other developers, whether that's, you know, the people, the talent, whether that's the design of mechanic that they've created somewhere, or their visual identity in their games, or the way that they create narrative, just something unique that really stands them out, that in their games you can see that, you know, that's why players would play their games. And that's definitely really important when we're looking for developers.
At Miniclip, one of the things that we look out for is the team's ability to operate the game after its launch. You know, working in mobile free-to-play, the real work begins when we actually launch the game. So it's one of the things that we absolutely look out for. But sometimes it's difficult to assess if it's the team's first game. In that situation, we would have much deeper product-led discussions in the very initial stages.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to add that those are amazing comments. And I think taking away this kind of Dunning-Kruger effect of, especially in today's climate, of being very divisive and drinking your own Kool-Aid day in, day out, I think having a pair of fresh eyes on game design or proven mechanics and assisting with these you know, game balance disruption or lost monetization or any of these things, I think a publisher and developer in unison could work really well together to sort that out if the partnership works well with all the things that we've been talking about. So seems to be a lot of good optimism around that, and that's good to hear.
You think that when you're looking for uniqueness, that's obvious in the first meeting, or is it something that you begin to see later on?
We spend a lot of time with our developers, like prior to, you know, building up relationships, talking to them for a long time. So I think it's something after a handful of meetings and getting to know each other and playing their games and looking, you know, having them present the studio strategy and vision to you and how they speak about that and what they're, you know, connected as a team. I think you can get a very good sense of whether they have that uniqueness and what that uniqueness looks like. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So I guess once you know, both sides have decided they want to work with each other, let's talk a little bit about, like, I guess, money and deal terms. I guess how flexible are, like, do you have a standard template for terms, or is it different depending on like team experience? Because just from my perspective, if we had a team that, you know, of former devs, right, and they made their studio and they've got some of the experience and like literally positions that cover some of the work that a publisher does, would you then scale like the revenue split, or is it just hard and fast? No, it's 50-50 or 30-70. I'll point that at Naheda.
At Miniclip, we're flexible. We start with a template for our third-party publishing, but we understand that different developers have different needs or games have different needs. For instance, if a developer is looking for some form of financial support, then we factor that into the revenue share. But there are certain services that, you know, we just offer as a baseline, and these are services outside of our core publishing duties, like game design support, tech support, in some cases extensive tech support. But these things wouldn't necessarily be factored into revenue share. It's yeah, I mean, it's very much a game by game basis thing.
Okay. Anyone else want to weigh in on that? Is it all?
Yeah, I mean, it's all flexible to a certain extent. You know, when basically the thesis of us starting ChargeUp Games was trying to charge about half. So our revenue share is usually around 25%. But the flip side is we're not providing, you know, the as deep financial support, as deep kind of QA stuff. So we are kind of going into this assuming that our developers are going to be able to handle a bit more. But that's part of the trade-off, right? We had a lot of developers that were coming to us, showing us terms from other publishers. No one here, luckily. But you know, the terms were literally 50% rev share, no guarantees. Good luck. And their developers have said, we know we need publishing. We know we have to do this, but we absolutely refuse to sign these terms. And I agree. Like I wouldn't sign that either. So our thought process was, well, let's try to do this a little bit differently, with the theory that mobile gaming is very, very, very hit driven. So if we kind of go in with lower terms, we should hopefully self-select the more successful games. But given that we just launched, our theory has not been proven yet, so fingers crossed.
Yeah, I would just add to that, we're extremely bespoke. We don't have any templates or anything that we use. It's very bespoke to the developer, because every developer cares about different things. Some developers really care about cancellation clause, termination protection. Some really care about rev share. Some really care about rights of first reviews, or all of these different things. So we tend to ask our developers what matters to them, and then construct the contract around that, and spend a lot of time talking about making sure that both sides feel good about that and feel good about the numbers. So I think that's really important from a publishing perspective in my mind. I know some publishers have templates, but I feel like here, sign this, and it's just a cookie cutter contract, in my opinion, is just not great, because that doesn't show that you care about the developer or have their best interests in mind. And I think, back to the relationship point, it is really about understanding what the developer cares about, and making sure that everybody feels safe and protected and good about what's going on. So I think that's our job as a publisher, to make sure our developers feel that way.
Awesome. Cool. Okay. I guess on the subject of money still. So there's a Crunchbase article way back in April this year that said only 2% of investment goes into female-led technology companies. So the actual question is, what percentage of studios, I guess, in your portfolio have invested have been female-led? Do you track that data? And actually, no, let me rephrase that. Let's just go wider. Like, do you have any sort of like diversity metrics that you're monitoring, or any programs that you're encouraging to increase more diverse games?
We definitely do at Riot. Oh, sorry, Ryan.
Yep.
Do you want to
Go ahead.
Okay. Yes, we do at Riot. We have definitely investment programs that are focused on underrepresented, minorities and different groups. For Riot Forge, that's definitely something I'm very passionate about. One of our goals with our League of Legends games is to increase diversity and capture different demographics in our games. And so in order to do that, we need to work with diverse developers, because we need that different experience and expertise and game design and thought process. So that's something that I'm very passionate about. We will only achieve those KPIs if we have diversity in the developers that are making those games. So yeah, that's definitely a really important part. And we have, KPIs around that.
Sorry, Ryan?
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, just from a Gem City perspective, like, we take diversity very seriously. Just back to your question about women in gaming, some of our strongest leaders within Gem City are female led. Like, some of the biggest studios within LA led by a very strong female. My boss, very strong, empowering female. So just from, a different, sorry, I can't talk. A diversity perspective, it's definitely a priority, within Gem City.
Anyone else? No?
Just to add to that, it's not something that Miniclip is directly doing, but actually one of my colleagues, Javian, in the commercial team, together with another co-founder, out of this pandemic, they came up with this games industry related webinar podcast called Game Changers. And the purpose of Game Changers is to, cover all areas of the games industry, but specifically to, allow females, but males are also invited, allow females to come into a space where knowledge is shared between females in the games industry, which is something that, we feel is lacking a little. So I think next week or the following week will be the 4th ever podcast, and that podcast specifically is on data analysis by to, you know, very well experienced females in the games industry.
Yeah, I love that stuff. And just to add to that as well, there's a ton of organizations out there that are really helping to elevate diversity in indie developers specifically. Like Wings is an amazing organization giving developers the opportunities, and programs like Code Covin and Elevate, which Riot Forge helps sponsor as well, are also looking to, you know, level up indie developers and giving indie developers more opportunity to sign with publishers. And that's very much, Code Covin and Elevate are very much focused on diverse groups as well. So I think the more publishers can support those type of programs as well, like we have the voice to be able to, you know, elevate those particular organizations. So I personally think that's something publishers could help with a lot.
Yeah, and just, I mean, as a random aside, our first client is actually a female-led studio based out of Beijing. And when I was at CrowdStar, we were one of the first companies that was actually, you know, female-focused. We had, you know, Covet Fashion and Home Designer. So I'm a believer that, you know, if you're only kind of representing one kind of game, it gets stale. So you need those kind of different viewpoints, and you know, you'll see things that you had no idea, and that's because you're getting, you know, these different viewpoints. So from our perspective, it's, you know, hopefully we're signing the best games, and a lot of times that means a more diverse kind of background from the teams.
Okay, we're coming up to the end. Oh, this is a good one. With the arrival of subscription services from like Apple and Google, I mean, premium mobile games are already on live support. Like, have they effectively turned live support off now? Do you think there's any, if you're a developer, is there any market for you to make any money on premium?
It's definitely tough. We've done, you know, we have tried to do premium games. I mean, we've worked with AAA studios with well-known IPs that wanted to do premium on mobile, and just the metrics just didn't shake out. Now, that being said, you know, the platforms are definitely trying to do better. Apple's obviously got Arcade. And so I'm hoping that, you know, it kind of continues to grow. And as the lines between mobile and console PC continue to blur, you know, as we're seeing with Microsoft's xCloud and stuff, I believe that looking forward 5-10 years, the premium mobile experience is going to be coming back, because again, it's going to be very similar to the console PC experience. But for right now, it doesn't make a lot of financial sense unless you're, you know, doing something with like an Apple Arcade.
I think the other thing that can help premium as well is the IP. I think some of the most successful premium mobile games I've seen are really strong IPs. So I think that's something as well that could have a good leverage for a premium mobile game.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Just had a question in the chat that you've answered. Thank you very much, Leanne.
Yep.
Just do that. Good. All right. Cool. Okay, 2 minutes. Let's get another good one. Yeah, okay. So, how important for you is it for a team to, when they're pitching to you, to have done some like market analysis? And I ask that because it seems to me that finding market data is actually quite difficult, especially like freely available. I know there's some reports that are eye-wateringly expensive, but how much work do you want the team to do before they get to you? And I guess I'll direct that at let's go for Riot.
Yeah, I mean, just from my perspective, like it's really important because it shows that like the dev is super serious. They've done the homework. They have a clear strategy in terms of how to scale their game, and you know why they think that genre or their specific game would be successful in that particular market. So, I mean, it's extremely important from my perspective. Just to be clear.
And Jason, I guess, would you agree with my sentiment? Like when you do market analysis,
Yeah,
yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, finding relevant data is very, very difficult, and so it's you always get stuck when you're pitching something, and then they kind of go, "Isn't that last year's data? We found that this has happened now." And you're like, so yeah, it's any way that you can access anything that's considered relevant is always helpful.
I actually, at least from my perspective, because I know how difficult that data is, and we actually just wrapped up an almost year-long project with one of those data providers that I will leave unnamed because it is eye-wateringly expensive. But we actually got to go through the data for 20,000 different mobile games and kind of see what's, the metrics behind them. So at least for us, I'm okay if they really kind of haven't done that, because I understand, number one, how difficult it is, and number two, that they probably don't have the exposure that someone like us does. So I kind of see that as being more on the publisher side of what sort of market should they go after? Should they do IP, all that sort of fun stuff.
So a participation award is okay with you, Kevin?
Yeah, exactly.
I do agree with that, actually, Kevin, because I think the publisher has access to so much more data. I think the thing that I would like to see from the developer is at least that they have a hypothesis. Like, even if they haven't got the data to confirm that opportunity that they think exists, but they believe this game should be made for X reason, and this is the hypothesis and the opportunity that they see. And then the publisher can help validate that. We have a lot more access to that data, and so I think we can take that hypothesis, validate it, share that data with the developer, and see if that is something that we want to do together.
Exactly.
Yeah, we talked about revenue quite a bit here, so let me throw something in on a data point. But yeah, we found, as we did when we were doing research, that 43 of the top 50 games in the Play Store have found cheats. So, revenue-wise, it's just these kinds of things that I think developers and publishers should really, really be concerned about, as mobile growth saturation market-wise has been quite a bit, and there's a lot of revenue at stake. In some cases for developers to even continue to be in operation. So it's something definitely we can help with. But as far as data in general, I think there's a lot of data. There's quite a bit of free data and a lot of reports that get published on that side. But yeah, echoing kind of Kevin's point and Ryan's point, I think it's important for a developer to do some sort of research and figure out where they kind of want to fit, because differentiation in this very overcrowded market is the biggest kind of advantage that you could have if you don't have a big user acquisition.
Okay. Just a final question then, a bit of a fun one. Like, what's next for mobile games? Like, what sort of markets are looking exciting for you over the next 12 months? And I'll point that at Naheda.
At Miniclip, we're heavily focused on PvP online multiplayer games, so it will always be the most exciting area for us. But otherwise, we're starting to see some genres, hybrids and genres, and this is constantly evolving. So it's difficult to say where the trend is going, but we are always trying to keep our eyes on the Play Stores, online, any way we can to try to capture whatever trend is bubbling.
For me, I'm actually really excited about Southeast Asia. It's a absolutely monster market that's starting to come online. I think the data I saw was like 1.5 billion people over the next decade or so. So probably not 12 months off, but looking forward, this could be kind of a monstrous market that hopefully is not going to have the same restrictions that we have with China, where it's kind of a shot in the dark to get your game actually through the approval process. And then, like Naheda said, we're seeing some really interesting hybrids start to come out, where games are kind of combining casual elements and then some casino elements, and it ends up being a kind of extremely compelling. And so you kind of get the best of both worlds, where you get the retention and downloads of a casual game, but the monetization of a casino game. So I think that stuff's super exciting.
Yeah, I agree on the emerging markets, Southeast Asia and India as well. Definitely looking to see how those markets are going to be doing over the next year. And then for Riot Forge, we're very much focused on story-driven experiences. So I'm interested to see where that's heading, especially like with the change in the movie industry and what's happening in Hollywood with, having to readjust to the online world and what that's going to do to kind of story-driven games. And also the interesting thing, I think, is more games looking into things like mental health and having story-driven experiences around that. And that seems to be a really interesting thing that's coming up recently in genres as well, which I'm interested to see where that goes.
We've identified this market for text-based games delivered on this thing called a cassette. I think it's going to take off.
Awesome. Right. You know what? I think we're out of time. So thank you so much for joining us if you're home, and thank you so much. It's been a great panel. I've made loads of notes here, so I'm looking forward to taking that back and talking to my teams. But yeah, thank you so much. And I guess we just end like, what's the best way for people at home to get in touch with you if they want to pitch a game? Like, is it just on your websites or? Shoot.
Can we share emails here?
Oh, yeah. Just do it.
Otherwise,
Right.
LinkedIn. LinkedIn
Maybe
is great.
The Zoom webinar chat.
Wicked. All right, cool. Blinded.
Yeah, LinkedIn. I talk to a lot of publishers every day, so feel free to send games.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Well, Danielle, this is over to you.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys so much for coming out. It was a really great panel. Loads of insights. Yeah, and I hope you enjoyed the rest of the show.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Yep,
everyone.
thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.